All right, so I can see I have 7 of you here. Go ahead and drop a message in the chat, on WhatsApp, on Discord. Let's have others join in so we can start off already. Okay? So if you can hear me, drop a message in the chat, so I'll be sure that, yeah, I'm sure that you guys are with me here. Let's start off very fast. Drop a message in the chat, 11 of you. Good evening, guys. How is it going today? So we're going to continue from where we left off, basically. All right, so that's from Kennedy. Yeah. Hi, Kennedy. Okay, so who else do I have in the audience here? Okay, I'll go sending message from YouTube. Okay, yeah. All right, drop a message in the Discord community, right? Drop a message on the WhatsApp group, Michael. Hello, okay. Victor, Chimsey, good evening. All right, good evening, guys. Okay, so let's kick off already. For those of you in the previous session we discussed, JavaScript strings, objects, and arrays. I think we also discussed arithmetic operations a bit, but we're going to take that again, right? We're going to go over arithmetic operations. This is already zoomed in. I think you should probably join with your laptop or zoom in on your end. Maybe I can just take off my image from 1 minute, please. Let's see. I can take off my image from here. Right. Okay. Hopefully this is better. Let me try to zoom in one more time. But yeah, I need to be able to make sure I reserve some space for my terminal. So I think you should zoom in on your end. You see, it becomes very jam-packed, right? You have little to no space to write code. So let's keep it this way. All right. Yeah. Good evening, Promise. Good evening, Any Greats. Okay, so let's continue from here. Arithmetic operations. Yeah. All right. So let's just try to come up with a very simple scenario. I have a simple file here. This is a JavaScript file. There's nothing in here, and you have the let's say you're on a project or you're working on something and you simply want to write a function, for example, or maybe write a code to add up some numbers. Right? You're trying to add two numbers, right? And you're basically not writing a function yet, just like 1 + 1, 2 + 2. Of course you'll be using the plus operator, which is basically the addition operator, right? So you can of course say maybe let a equals probably 5 plus 5, right? And of course you want to print that value. So I think we covered this in the previous session, but if we did not, what you're basically seeing here is your arithmetic operation, right? This is performing addition here. You have subtraction, right? You have multiplication, you have division, right? You have modulo, which will basically give you the remainder. Okay, so we're going to cover them one after the other. Let's quickly take this off. Let's come back into this file. So given this value, let a equals b, let a equals 5, let b equals 2. This is the variables we have in here, correct? And to perform addition, we use sum. Maybe I can move this, into our JavaScript file. Yeah, so I can simply say console.log. So if I log sum, of course, let's run this. You see we have 7, right? That's the sum. If I log the difference, right? So let's go ahead and log the difference. So the difference, okay, that's 3 because we're simply saying 5 minus 2, right? The product, which is multiplication, the quotient, which is basically we're doing division here. The remainder, we're doing, this is the modulo sign. So you're basically checking for the remainder. So 5, let's go ahead and try this here. So remainder, of course, we're going to be getting 1, 2 remainder 1, correct? And exponentiation, which is, of course, exponential, right? Some other languages would give you things like raised to power like this, okay? But right here we're using the product sign, but we're using double of that product sign. So this gives us exponentiation, okay? So if we go ahead and run this with exponentiation selected, that is 5 raised to the power of 2, which is 25, okay? That's 5 times 5, right? That is exponentiation. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. If you have followed this material was shared with you already. Okay, if you have followed this material, I believe you should have covered this already. Okay, so we have that remainder operator, which is the modulo, right? We also have assignment operators, right? So you can basically see we have let x equals 5, we have x plus equals 3, which is equivalent to x equals x plus 3. So these are short forms of basically using these arithmetic operators. So instead of saying x equals x plus 3, when you have x plus equals 3, this is basically going to give you the equivalent to this, right? So if I say, let's add x, for example, right? Uh, Equals, so we can simply do let add x. I just want to make that kind of like the value, right? Okay, let's not use a single line. So basically what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make this, pass this into a new variable, right? But instead I'll just go ahead and comment on this, and then I would simply say console.log uh x, right? So if I do this now, you see we have 8. So basically what is happening is x equals x plus 3, which is x equals 5 plus 3, because x is actually 5 here. Okay, so and then you get the value, which is let's see, which is 8, correct? Okay, so let's go ahead and clear what we have here. We also have the other options, right? So these are the equivalent, right? So this is same as this, right? This is same as this. Okay, so it's just a short form of writing x equals x times 4, or x equals x divided by 2, right? So yeah, let's go back to this file. So we have the unary operators. Okay, so basically if you have a single value just like this, so you have the variable plus plus, this is simply going to increment by 1, this would decrement by 1, and then this would add a negative value to that particular value. So just giving it a negation there, okay? So this is an example. Let num equals 10. So if I go ahead to say console.log, let's go ahead and say num. I'm going to take this off, right? Let's just comment that, okay? So let's run this. I have 11, so we have 10, 10 plus plus, which is 10 plus 1, right? So having this is equivalent to saying num equals num plus 1, right? So it's equivalent to doing this. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead. All right, so num minus minus, right? So this will basically decrement by 1, and negation is simply going to add that negative sign, right? Negation. Okay, so I can run this. So we have an error. Let's see. We did console.log negation. Okay, so where did I make that mistake? Okay, I think I did not save. All right, so minus 10. Okay, so I am looking at the chat. If you have any questions, we can take that. Can take your questions as we proceed. Just drop it in the chat. All right. So let's proceed. The comparison operator. This is basically how you perform comparison, like greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, which is the strict equal to. We also have an option that is not here. I will explain that right away. So let's take this off. We have two variables, right? We have variable A, we have variable B. Variable A is equivalent to 5, variable B is equivalent to 8, right? That is, the values assigned, to the variable here, okay? Um, Right. So we say let A equals 5, let B equals 8. And now we are saying console.log A greater than B. So this is going to give us, true or false. If I run this, you see we have the first one, false, right? 5 is not greater than 8. Okay. 5 is less than 8. That's true, right? We have 5 is greater than or equal to 8. Definitely, that's a false, right? That's a false value. 5 is less than or equal to 8. Yes, that's true, right? Now we also have 5 is equivalent to 8. Of course, that's false because it's not. Okay. 5 is not equal to 8. Okay. Now, when you see these options, right, we also have the option of using the double equal sign. So this is one, and I'm going to explain both. And this is the other one where you have one, two, three. Okay. All right. So basically, the way this I think. Oh, 1 minute. Hold on, please. Let me see. Oh, okay. All right. So the way this actually works is when you are using the double equal sign, what is happening? For example, if we have let var, let's just call it var one, right? So let's say we have let var one equals 10 and let var two equals 10 like this. Okay. So basically, what is going to happen is that you're going to simply there's this term used for it. I think it's called coercion, if I'm not mistaken, right? Coercion is that ability for JavaScript to try to first convert this to see if it can actually convert this into the type that you have here. So if I say var1 equals var2, right? So what is happening here is that you're basically going to perform that coercion, and it's going to try to first convert this into the same type before checking if it's the same, right, in terms of the value. Okay. So if we run this, for example, console.log, and we have var1 equals var2, just like that. So you see, this is telling us, by the way, we can actually turn some of these guys off. So let's go ahead and comment on this. We don't need this for now. Let's take this off for now. Okay, so this is basically what we have. Let's go ahead and run this again. Right here, you see we have true, right? Even though we know that this is a string, not an integer, not a number. This is a number, this is a string. It tells us that they are equal to the same thing, because what happens is it doesn't really, it's not checking the type, right? It's not checking the type because it can convert it to an int or a number before doing the check, right? Now when you use the triple equal sign, it is going to check against both the value and the type, right? So this is going to tell us false, because although it's the same value, it's not the same type. Okay, so just have that in mind, right? The first option checks for the value you have in there. The second option doesn't check. The second option checks for both the value and the type, making it a strict. So that's why you see we have equal to but strict, right? This is doing equal to. This is not strict. Okay, so just have that at the back of your mind when you are using those operators. Okay. If we proceed, we then have the logical operators. Where you have the trues, the false. Checking for using the logical and, logical or logical not. Okay. So you're basically trying to see, is this yeah. So we're basically saying, okay, it's true and it's false, right? So look at this first. You have is true, which is true, and you have is false, which is false. Now this might be a little bit a little confusing for those of you that don't really have any prior experience of knowing how these things work, like true and false. Okay, there's something we used to call the truth table back in the day. I think you can actually do some googling on that, right? Truth table. But basically, what you're seeing here is we have true, and then we have and, we have false, right? So true and false. This is a logical and, right? So let's go ahead and see what the result looks like here. So you see we have false. So true and false. It's more like you know if you have okay, so there's a way we used to do this back then where we use like zeros and ones, right? And this is more like standing in as or. This is or, of course, logical or, right? So is this or this, right? You have a particular value, true or false, right? So if you have true and false, of course, since we're working with or, true actually takes precedence here, right? And it's able to stand independently, when you have or, when you're working with the logical or, right? When you have and, it's more like having one and zero, right? Because true ideally, represents one, right? And false represents zero when it comes to that, logic, right? When it comes to logic, that's how you basically represent this, just like the way you have binary numbers, right? And then you are able to represent this with, on and offs. This is going to be a bit complex, and I don't really want to go into, I don't want to dive so deep into the whole logic thing, right? Uh, I think what we can do instead is maybe have a different session to actually talk about logic, zeros and ones, how to basically see what value takes precedence, and depending on the the relationship or the kind of comparison you're trying to check, right? So this is a multiplication kind of scenario where you basically have one and zero. Basically zero takes precedence here, and you have false, right? You have one or zero, right? One actually takes precedence here. So there are actually rules and laws that guides this, and you basically find this more in things like electronics, right? If you did this in school, if you did computer science and you remember digital electronics, that was one of the courses where you basically tend to learn. I was very good at this. I mean, I remember very well. I loved this particular course back then. But yeah, I mean, for now, it's not really like a huge deal for you, except this is not right. So you have not true. The idea is if you have a true value, not true means false, right? Not false, of course, means true. So it's kind of like the reverse. There are diagrams we use in representing these things back then. I really loved, those classes. And yeah, this would also come in handy. It would mostly come in handy, when you're trying to check for some cases. So, for example, you have some conditional statements. You're trying to mix it up with other conditional statements. You're checking, if this happens here or this happens there, right? So you have options. So when you have options, most likely you're going to go with that condition if there's a single condition that you're going to go with the option if there's a single condition that is met. Do you understand? So let's say you have if a, and this is just pseudocode, right? So if a less than 5, right? Or if b greater than 3, right? Or 4 or 5, any number. So basically we have or, which means if one of these is met, then it means we're good to go, right? If one of these is met, then we're good to go. Now what if you now have something like and? When you have and, what you're saying here is that both of them must be met, actually, right? So if this and if that, okay? So if this is a condition, you are saying before anything, let's just say we have execution. Now this is a pseudocode. When I say pseudocode, what I'm trying to say is it's not a code that at least you expect to say it must work. We're just trying to describe something. Okay. So we say if this and if this, which means both of them has to be met before this would work, right? But if we then change the whole logic here to or, saying that if this or this, right? It means at least if one is met, then we're good to execute. Okay. So I just want to make this, a bit clearer for some of you that have no prior knowledge of, this kind of logical thinking. But this would come in really handy, and I'm sure you will love it as we proceed, with the course. Let's not try to dive so deep into this to avoid confusions. I think I did dive deep already, but hopefully you're still with me, right? 47 of you. All right, so let's take this off and let's proceed to the next one. So we have the logical assignment operator. So basically, just like what we covered before, where you have like a shorthand, right? So this is equivalent to this. This is equivalent to this. So x, and you have the and, the logical and equals 3. What that is doing is you simply have x equals x and 3, right? X equals x or 8, right? So it's equivalent to the other one. So we also have the knowledge coalescing operator, right? So the way it works is you are basically trying to check if there's a Okay, so let's just follow this. I think that would be the best way, so I won't end up confusing anybody here. So the knowledge coalescing operator returns the right hand operand when the left hand operand is null or undefined, right? So if the left hand operand is null or undefined, you get the right hand operand. So let me put it this way: you have an example. You're working on your code base, and then you're saying, this is what I want you to give me, right? But then if there's nothing here, right, give me this alternative. Okay, so we have an example. Let's say x equals John Doe as a name. So John Doe, right? So yeah, at some point, I mean, looking at this code, if there's no John Doe, just tell us maybe um, Mac Doe, right? So every single now and then, I actually want to call this, and when I call this, I want my result to be John, right? So whenever I make a call, not print, that is Python, sorry, console.log, we have results. Okay, so whenever I make a call to this, I expect John, right? But on a fateful day, John is no longer available, and John was not on duty or so, right? Just in my example. And then we're saying, okay, the particular day where we have John not being available, let's move over to call the other item, which is Y, which is Mark, right? In this scenario. So it's more like a way to say, okay, if this doesn't exist, give me that, right? And that makes sense, right? So we'll call that the knowledge coalescing operator. Okay, so let me look at the charts. We don't have any question just yet. We also have that exponentiation operator, of course, for performing exponentials. I explained that already. Okay, so someone said, but please, what can make a code absent? Okay, so it's not, let's not say what can make a code absent. Let's say what will make a value absent. Now, if you're working with an API call, right, and I'm going to give an example here. So please stay with me. Let me just show a simple diagram here. So you're working with an API call. You are trying to call a server. You are writing, you have written your JavaScript code, and what your JavaScript code is meant to do. This is your function. So you have a function that makes an API request, correct? And this function is meant to call an API, right? The fact is that this API is meant to respond with some data, right? Maybe like the name or some set of fruits or some set of items. So when we make this API call every single now and then, the expectation is we are going to get some returned value. So the returned value can be a name. So let's just say a name, for example, John Doe. Now in your code, you can say, okay, whenever this name doesn't show up, just return a statement like uh, a statement like there is no user for today, right? Or yeah, maybe that can work, right? So whenever we call this API, show us the data, whatever data is found there. We don't know what the data would be, right? But whatever it is, just present it to us. But on a particular day, let's assume that that data does not exist, or the user hasn't logged this information yet on our API. Go ahead and tell the user on the dashboard screen there that, okay, the data you're looking for does not exist for now, right? So back in the code, we basically have some sort of API call. So maybe that's some sort of function, right? API call, and that function is going to be fetching some data, right? It's going to fetch some data. Okay, then on our UI, we simply want to present that data, right? So let's call that result data. So result data should always present that data, but if that data does not exist, just tell us data not found, correct? So I think that makes sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and log the result if there is no data. So for now, I'm just going to put a simple function here. We'll get to function, by the way. And my function, I am not returning anything. So I just want to return null, which is to mock this. I'm just mocking this to say there's no database call, and nothing was returned, correct? So if I run this, we have an error. What is the error? So it says result is not defined. Yes, because we forgot to change this as well. We changed the name of our variable. We still have a different error. I did not save. Is that the case? Let's try this one more time. So now you see data not found. If we have a data that we are returning, which is the name as I showed in that diagram, so John Doe, for example, and then I run this, so we still have data not found. Okay, so why do we have data not found? Let's see. Hope I saved this well. Oh, okay. I think I'm kind of, not saving well on time. Let's save. All right, Control S. So now you see we have John Doe, right? But if there is no data, which is null, right? So come on, man, save. So when there's no data, we have data not found. All right, so there's nothing wrong with my keyboard for some reasons. I have to press this twice before it saves. That's weird. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. What's that name? Derivi week. Okay, that's also weird. Let's go. Let's continue. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Mister. Okay, so let's continue straight into this page. So we have been able to cover some of the things we have in the arithmetic operations file. Let's move on to the next, which is control flow, right? I mentioned something conditional where I said you have like a condition to check for. In JavaScript, when working with a conditional, you basically use, you can use the if statement, right? We have the if else statement where you check for multiple conditions. You can check for multiple else case. But this is how it works, right? Um, you are trying to perform an operation, and the idea is we have different things that we could check for. So let's say apple, let's say orange, let's say we have some other fruit. I don't know. Let's say uh, okay, so now it seems like I don't know the fruit to use again. Okay, you can drop some examples in the chat. So we basically have these options here, and we want the user to make a request. And we tell the user we have some keys, right? If you send in A, right, it means you need an apple. If you send in B, it means if you send in O, it means you need an orange, correct? And now we have given the user options. So the user is then going to say, we have a user sitting right here. The user is then going to say, Mango, thank you very much. We are both from the village. Okay, mango. Let's go ahead and have mango right here. What else? That's from any grades. Banana. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's enough. That's enough fruits already. Banana. Okay, so all right. So now we have this yeah, we have this set of fruits, and we are giving our user the option, right, which is A, O, what else? M, right? We're giving them these keys, right? And then we also have B, okay, which is for banana right here. So we're telling the user what exactly do you want, you have to pick one, right? So the user is saying, okay, I need A, right? So if the user comes and say, okay, I need A, it means we are rest assured that we this user needs an apple, right? So if the user comes in to say, oh, I actually need B, then we are rest assured that okay, we have to give the user a banana, right? And that's how the logic goes from there. Okay, so the input data is going to determine what option you get, right? Based on the condition you set. Okay, so it can be false, it can be true, it depends on what your condition, what you're building up with your condition, right? And of course, I'm going to show yeah, let's come back here. Sorry, a minute control flow, and yes, let's preview that. Okay, preview. Come on, preview. Oh, okay, that is not working. Let's go back, close this control flow, preview. Oh boy, preview. Okay, not that. Why am I not getting that option to preview? Is something wrong? I don't know. Let's try a different page function. Come on, preview, preview. Okay, so this is quite awkward, but one more time. This is an MD file preview. That's quite weird. Maybe I need to just give me a minute. Let's close that. Sorry, let's close that. CD desktop JavaScript. Okay, code. Just 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Yeah, of course, it's not HTML, I know, but I have a Markdown preview, which is what I mean. It's better to present this in Markdown. Okay, it can preview, right? So it's called a Markdown preview. Okay, not we're not using a live server or something. It's quite weird that I'm unable to preview this. Let's. Oh yeah, I think it's coming up. So I think it's my VS Code or something. I don't know. Let's close this. Close this. I would have to check that properly. Yeah, so it's a markdown file, and it's very intentional so that when you open this up on GitHub, you can also see the preview rather than see the code. Okay. So sorry for that delay. Let's proceed. Back to my main.js file. Let's have that opened up on one side. All right. So let's take this off. And we're going to look at an example of the control flow statement. Okay. So we have a condition, right? The if statement here allows you to execute a block of code if a specified condition is true, right? So it's going to run if a specified condition is true. So yeah, you have a condition by default to just assign true here, right? You have that particular condition and you're saying, okay, if that condition, right, which means if this condition is true, when you just have the condition stated like this, it means you're checking if it's true, right? But remember, you can also say is equal to false, right? Is this true? Is this false? Let's have true just like this, or you can have false, right? So you can always check. And of course, it's still going to happen if this is true, right? So we refer to this as, oh, this is actually true, because if the condition is false, it means, oh, this is actually true. Let's go ahead and run this here. So don't get me wrong when I say if it's false, it's true. What I'm trying to say is if the condition here is met, then this block is regarded to say now we are running this because that condition is met. Do you understand? So in most cases, you get to see a code like this. You have a condition outside. The condition can be a function, something happening in a function, right? So you have a function. You're trying to check if a user already exists in the system. I'm going to write a pseudocode here as well because we're not working with a database. Okay. So you have a user sending a request. A user is going to send in a request. So let's call that a request ID, right? That user's request ID might be, the user's email, right? So John Doe at gmail.com. Okay. And now we are simply going to check if this user already exists in our database, right? So we're simply going to have a function. Let's say check if user exists, right? Let's say in DB, okay, something like this. All right, so that's a function, and we're going to pass in a request ID, just as an example. We'll get to talk about functions shortly. So what you're seeing here is we'll have a particular function. This is going to check our database, right? Um, so it's going to simply search for the user email. Probably it's better to have this named well. So let's just say we're checking with the user email. And I'm just going to return true, right? So I'm simply going to say now that, if this, right? So let's just put that in there. So you can say if this, I mean, if that is what you want to call, or you can also go ahead to put that condition here, as saying you are calling the function, right? So tell us that, oh, okay, the user was found in the DB, right? So this is just an example. Now, this is not very realistic. I think I made a mistake there. Let me go ahead and do node. Uh, yeah, let's first go into JS. That's the directory. Okay, so let's clear this node and main.js. Okay, so now I run this. Of course, nothing happens here. Let's clear and run it again. Let's make sure that this works fine. So we just say, okay, function email exists, blah, blah, blah. So now we probably pass in the email here. Okay, and then maybe we choose to also return that email, which means it's going to get some data, right? So it's going to get some data. So we'll say if the condition, okay, let's run this one more time. And if something is wrong, yeah, because we did not console.log, okay? So .log, we're just, we did not really output that. So now you see, somebody say, I don't understand the DB part. Now, as I said earlier, we are not calling a database, right? We don't have our database, set up anywhere. We've not gotten to that yet. So this is an assumption, okay? Promise. We're making an assumption that we're going to call our database here, but we are not doing it because we've not gotten to that part, all right? So I'm just trying to show you how to use the if condition, right? We're trying to use so someone said, why is my YouTube not that clear? I think it's yeah, maybe you guys can help him out in the chat there. We're trying to use this function to just make an assumption that we actually have, a database, and then we're going to basically return whatever value we find in there, right? We can also choose to return null, null, right? And that is to say, if you are returning null, is to say you have a false, which means we did not find any record, that kind of stuff, right? So if you run this, you see nothing was printed because, the condition was not met. Do you understand? Now, where the other part comes in, which is the else, when you have if else, it means you are saying, okay, if the condition is not met, the else part is simply going to tell us, okay, what do we do if this condition is false, right? So if we have an else here, so we can say if this user exists, tell us the user was found in DB. If the user does not exist, right, then probably you want to tell us that console.log. Okay, so we have that. So the user was not found in the DB, correct? So when I run this, you get the user was not found because we return null. If I return the email, which is to say, just as an example, the user was found, it tells us the user was found in the DB. Go ahead and drop your question in the chat. Let's do that for the next 2 minutes before we continue. Drop your questions in the chat if you have any. Okay. If what I have explained is a bit confusing, before we move on to if else if, right? Go ahead and drop a message in the chat. All right, so let's do that real quick. Drop your messages in the chat. Okay. All right, so I see we don't have any questions, which means you guys are actually following this. Okay, so what we've done right now is we basically checked for a simple condition here, right? If this is true, if a data is returned, it means it's true. If nothing is returned or you have null, it means it's false, right? So at this point, this is truthy. Let's say this is truthy and this is falsy. Okay, so if this is not found, we run this code. If it's found, we run this code, okay? And this is a simple way to write an if-else statement. Then we have if-else if, right? So where you are trying to check for multiple conditions, right? So I'll give a different example for that, okay? So we are expecting a data from the user, right? Let's call that user input, for example. And the user input we're expecting, it can be, a series of numbers, okay? So let's just say user input here is equals 5, okay? It can be 6, it can be 7. But now we have if user input, right, we say equals 5. Okay, we want to get this. Okay, by the way, we can simply wrap this. Okay, just good. Okay, so if it equals 5, do something here. If it equals 5, if it equals 5, right? If it's not equals 5, so now you have else if, right? So if it equals 6, for example, do something else, right? So do something else if it equals 6. Okay. You can also have another else if. All right. I mean, it's not a good practice to have a bunch of if else ifs, right? But just to make you understand how it works. So if it's 7, do something else if it equals 7. All right. And then you can now have your final else. All right. So else, um, you know, just say, okay, let's actually do something practical here. So if it equals 5, just go ahead and console.log. You entered 5, great. Okay. So if it equals 6, just say console.log. You entered 6. If it's 7, console.log. You entered 7, right? And else, I'll just say console.log. Um, you entered something else, right? We can make it a little bit fun. I don't tire. All right, so let's save this and let's run the code. So if I do node main.js, you entered 5 because that's what we entered, right? If I enter 7, for example, it's going to tell us you entered 7. If I entered 9, and well, the code is tired of us, right? So I don't tire. We can say I don't tire for you. Okay. Someone is saying, can we use greater than in the first else if? Of course, I mean, you can make it dynamic, but that's up to you. So you know your condition, you know what you're trying to check for. So what you mean is, can you use something like this? If it's greater than 6, right? So if you're using greater than, and then you have a value at this point that is greater than, of course, that will be met, right? It means this is kind of pointless at this point. But yeah, you can use greater than. You can even use less than, greater than, less than. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to check for. Okay, but yes, you can actually use that. You can use any of the arithmetic operations. So you can use either of the the whole condition, the whole what's it called, relationship check, right? Where you are basically saying greater than, less than, logical operators, and or and all those stuff. Yes, you can do that. You can say if this is this, right, or this is that, right, or you can have and this is that. Okay, so you can definitely have multiple checks. Okay, You can have multiple checks. All right, so let's save that. Let's move back into this file. We've checked if else, and if else if. You also have the ternary operator. So the ternary operator is basically a short form of writing your if else condition, right? So we have an example here. I can paste this here. Yeah, okay. So we have let is raining equals true. So let weather, which is a new variable, equals is raining. Now, the way this is going to work is if is raining equals true, you're going to get a value of bring an umbrella. So basically, you have true right here and you have false right here. Okay. So if you look at the example here, if it's raining, bring an umbrella. If it's not raining, enjoy the sunshine. So if we run this, for example, console.log weather, save that and we'll run it. By the way, I hope it's saved properly. Let's run it again. All right, so we have bring an umbrella. Now, if it's not raining, which means if I change this to false, it's going to tell us enjoy. Oh, come on, save, Control S, run this, enjoy the sunshine. Okay, so I hope that is clear. That is the ternary operator right there. Okay, so let's go back into this file. We have the switch case. All right, we have the switch case. So these are basically part of your control flow. So the switch case statement here is basically used to check for multiple cases. Okay, so you can have different cases instead of using if else. You can basically have you're switching for the day, right? So what might possibly come in, right? If it's Monday, tell us is the start of the week, right? And break there. Break is going to terminate it, after doing this, just break, right? If it's Tuesday or if it's Friday, tell us is almost, weekend is almost here, right? And if it's none of those days, tell us it's a regular day. So if I say Wednesday, for example, or maybe Tuesday, we don't have Tuesday right here. So let's save. Let's go ahead and run this. Save very well. All right, let's run this again. It's a regular day, right? If it's Friday, it's going to tell us, make sure you have it saved. All right, so weekend is almost here. If it's Monday, save properly. All right, and now we have is the start of the week. So can we use JavaScript to extract information from real world, like temperature? Okay. If I get you correctly, extracting information from the real world, like how do you mean? You should have some gadgets or tools, right? That you're basically using, of course, to read those kind of data. So I think maybe you should, review that question, think about it thoroughly. If you have the devices, right, and then the devices, it accepts JavaScript as a language. It's compatible with JavaScript as a language. Yes, you can actually use it for that. I think in the space of IoT, you find a lot of people using Python, with things like Raspberry Pi or Arduino with things like C++. I've not really seen people use JavaScript for things like that, but I believe there should be a way, or maybe some tools or some kind of PCB related tool, right? So I'm not going to dive so deep into that your question, but yes, you can actually search for some tools that might do the work for you. In terms of connecting with those those devices. Okay, so we have while or sensors, I think that's what they're called. All right, so we have while loop. So this is a loop. Apart from using the switch statement where you have different cases, you're checking for different case, which of course you can use for numbers as well. You can check for different case, right? Maybe you have a way. Let me show you a practical example of working with the switch case here, right? Um, Okay, someone is asking example of else if using the ternary. No, 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 no. So the ternary operator basically focuses on that your true and false with a single condition you already have as as what's it called, as a single expression. So back to that, you have a single expression like let condition equals true. So your condition can be bringing, I mean, your condition can be as a result of anything. It can be a function. You might have a function, right? You might have a function, hello world, or let's say returns true, right? So returns true or false, right? And then we can choose what to return in here. All right, so now we're returning true. So if we call this guy, of course, you're expecting true, and then you have let results, right, equals condition, okay, and then you have the true or false thing, which are ternary here. So you have the true or false thing where you can have I don't know, we can have returned true, true, or returned false. So yeah, basically that is what you do with ternary. Let's move on. So let's move on. I want to show you for that switch. So imagine you have different grades, right? So you have grades. You have a function that is you're trying to compute or check the grades of your students to actually grade them based on the scores that they have, right? So if you're trying to do things like grading and you're not using like a conditional statement or so, you can then say yeah, so you have a value coming in, right? So you can actually say, okay, we want to switch grades right here. So the first case you are getting, you can say um if this is maybe I don't know, greater than 50, right? You have some sort of or. Okay, so basically that's how you can do some additional stuff here. So you can say, is this greater than 50? Is a greater than 50? Blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean, for now, let's just say we're checking for case of 50, right? And we're checking for like case of 60, case of 70, stuff like that. So let's say 70, right? And the default is I don't understand. So let's just say I don't understand. I don't quite understand. So let's say I don't understand your input. Okay, so I don't understand your input. If it's a 70, maybe you can tell us, this is some kind of like A, right? If it's 50, just tell us this is D, okay? So that's kind of like the grade, you understand? So if we have a 50, then of course we'll have a D. If you have like a 70, you have an A. This is terrible, but yeah. So now we have a D right there. If you have 70, and of course you have something like okay, save properly, Control S, try this again. So now you have A. All right, so let's take that off. That is basically the switch statement. So let's talk about the while loop, right? So the while loop basically executes a block of code as long as the specified condition is true, right? So as long as that condition is true, it is constantly going to, you know, um, run that code. So it's going to loop, right? It's going to continually loop what you have in here. So we say we have a count of 0. We say while the count is less than 5, right? Go ahead and print the value of count. So you see what we have here. We're incrementing the count while we are looping, because if you don't do that, then this is going to run forever, correct? So let's cancel that. It's going to run forever. As you can see, I'm scrolling. I'm actually scrolling, but you're seeing the same thing. So what we are doing instead is let's increment, so that by the time it runs 5 times, this is incremented from 0 to 5. It will stop that particular loop, right? So now you see we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. If you have 50, for example, this is going to loop in 50 places. Save. Let's save properly and try this again. So now you see it was able to loop from 0 to 49, which is 50, of course, right? 0 to 49. So that is basically how the while loop works, right? You have the do while loop. I'm going to move on to function real quick, but you can check this out. So the do while loop is similar to the while loop, but it ensures that the block of code is executed at least once before checking the condition, right? So the block of code will be executed at least once before running, before checking the condition. Okay, so that is what is happening here. It runs once, it increments by 1 before checking that particular condition. Okay, so you have the for loop, which is also very important. A lot of people use the for loop. You're trying to perform some sort of incremental operation. This is how you use the for loop. This is what's explaining right here. So we have this sample code, right? So say let I equals 0, and if I is less than 5, right? I plus plus, which means increment that operation, right? With one step, which is I plus 1, right? I plus plus means I equals I plus 1. Remember, so this iteration is going to move how many times? 5 times, from 0 to 4, which is 5 times. Okay. So if we have maybe I plus 2, right? Of course, I'm sure you know what is going to happen here. So let's save that. Make sure you save that. Save. All right. And run this again. Okay. So now we have, I think that was a mistake there. We basically have an incremental operation that was wrong. So we're saying I plus 2. Um, Basically, what we are trying to do is okay, we're trying to increment every single step, right? Um, let's see, where am I making that mistake? Wait, hold on a bit. So we have let I equal 0, I is less than 5. Let's say I is less than 50, for example, right? I plus plus is going to take that, every one step. Okay, so what you can do is to then maybe check. You can add some additional conditions, maybe like you can say if it says, sir, please, you're too fast. We're trying to cover a lot of things. Don't worry, you'll come back to this video. Chooks Entertainment Media. Okay. You'll come back to the video. It's already, we just have 10 more minutes and we have not covered function just yet. Okay. Yeah. So please make sure you come back to the video after the class, right? Make sure you come back to the video after the class. So we have this for loop, right? What we are doing with the for loop basically, we're saying let I equals 0, which is we're initializing our index, right? I is less than 50, which we have basically created a length, right? How long do we want to execute this? We want to execute this, as we basically increment and continually, perform an action up to 50 times, right? From 0 to basically 49, okay? So when we say console.log, with that iteration, we're going to be printing, the iterations one after the other, right? So if I should run this, you're going to see that iteration, iteration 0, 1, 2, 3, down to 49, which makes it a whole of 50, correct? So 0 to 49, basically, okay? We're starting from 0. All right, so this is basically how you work with a for loop, similar to, the while loop as well. But, the thing here, it's you basically have a length. So imagine having an array, you fetch some data, right? So let me use an example of an array. This is an array of objects, right? So we have let users, for example. So we've covered arrays already. So you have an array of objects, and each user maybe has like a user ID, right? Of maybe one. Let's say username of John Doe. So you can have different records, right? Which are objects, of course, in this particular array. So you have two. You have Merido, for example. Okay. All right. So now you have let I equals this, and then you have the length, right? So the length here, of course, we have is 2, which is, 1, 0, 1, 2. Okay. So you have basically two items in here. You can say I plus plus, and you simply want to go ahead and print the values in here. Okay. So, yeah, so basically, there are ways for you to, capture the value in here. This is basically what you use in a real scenario to basically capture the data that you have in a loop. Now, there are different ways to basically work with for loop. There's a better option where you have what to call for each, right? So you have for each, okay. So you have I don't let's see. You have like user or yeah users dot for each user, right? Just trying to be very sure if this is exactly how we used to do it. So I think I am wrong at this point. So yeah, let me try to, let's see, quick fix. All right. So is it a spelling thing? It is not supposed to be a spelling error. Okay. So yes, there's a mistake here, and that's because I haven't used that in a while. So let's quickly check this, and I'm sure we will find the for each. Give me a second. Let's see. Okay. All right. I think I figured the mistake I made there. Mm, oh, right. Okay. So I'm looking at my notes here, and I think I figured the mistake I made there. So I'm supposed to come back here. Let's bring back that value. So what I did was I said users dot for each the elements. So this is actually how you do that. So you have the elements, and then you can do this within the, yeah. So this is a different way to work with a loop, right? So let's do console.table so we can print those items into tables. This is a different way to work with a loop, especially when you work with arrays, right? This is a better way to work with arrays because you can then choose to, let's see, what do we have there? It says that is not a function. This is supposed to be capital E, correct? Okay, so I think, yeah. So yeah, a capital E, that was the error. Let's run this again. Okay, so we're able to just drop out, bring in the IDs because that is what we captured here. Let's take off the ID itself and let's bring in the whole thing. So now you are seeing we're able to loop through this array of objects and also present the objects, like this because we're using a table. Okay, if you use a log, and of course it just prints it out as a log, just like this. Okay, So now we are looping through. This is also a for loop, but we'll call it the for each loop in JavaScript. It's a better way when working with, items like this, because you don't want to start, checking for the length, even though you can with a regular for loop, right? Even though you can with a regular for loop, this is much better. Okay, so let's go back into this. We have the break statement. I mentioned that before when we walk to the case, right? The switch case. If you are using the break statement, you are basically saying that if a condition is met within your loop, just break the execution. Don't continue the loop. Just break the execution once that is met. Okay. So that is what would happen here. It will get to this point, it will break this, and it will not continue with a loop. Let's copy, let's paste, right? So what I'm going to do now is if I run this, you see it got to 4, right? Maybe we can try. Yeah, this is supposed to print down to 10, right? But because it has passed, item 1, which starts from 0 here, right? So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is, of course, if you count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So after getting to the position of the index of 5, we break this, okay? If I say get to the index of 8, then of course it's also going to get to that particular index, which is at position 7. Do the count: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of course, starting from 0, gives you a total of 8. So which means it got to position 8, right? That's the index, and then it breaks. Okay. So by the way, if you're confused when I count 8 and you're saying 7, is because our count starts from 0. All right. I hope that explains it. Okay. So that is how you work with the break statement. In a more practical scenario, you are working on some projects, and then you're trying to check a loop to say at any point in time, if I figure out that this value exists in this array of items I get from the server or from some endpoint, just go ahead and log that in a DB. Tell them that we experienced some issues, we found this kind of record, and that is not what we are looking for. So we broke the loop at that point. Okay. So you also have the continue statement. So what the continue statements will do is that it will skip, you know, um, it will basically skip that, that particular loop, that particular action that is trying to perform, and move on to the next iteration. So now we are saying if I equals to continue, what happens here is that it's going to skip one of the items it is meant to print, right? Because we have skipped that particular one. Let's go ahead, paste this here, save. So we say let I equals 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus. It's going to increment, plus 1, right? And then we say if I equals 2, continue. It is going to skip that. So take a look at this. 0, 1, it skips 2 and it moves on to 3, right? So because we used continue, the continue statement will perform a skip basically in that, check. All right. So we have the comma operator that you can use to initialize, multiple items at the same time with a single statement. Let A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, right? That is what the comma operator gives you. You can check this after the class. Make sure you go through this material. Let us quickly touch on the basics of functions. All right, let's try to present this again. We still have the same bug here, so let's ignore that for now. Yeah, I mean, it's quite weird that it doesn't work, right? That was supposed to preview automatically. Anyways, um, that's fine. Let's move on. So let's move on. Let's see, what do I have here? Okay, so this is a function. The JavaScript function is going to help you create reusable block of codes, right? That you can invoke at any point, depending on the way you organize your code, right? But the point is you get reusability. I have a function, for example. This is how you define a function. You have a function, the syntax function, the name of your function, for example, greetings function. Let's call that greetings function, right? That is the name of your function. You have your parameters, the function parameters. So we can be passing the name and the specific greeting, right? Maybe morning, afternoon, or evening with the name. And then we have the the execution, what we actually want to execute in here. So let me use a return. A return statement in a function is to say, give us this value. Once you get that return, nothing else will be executed. So if you continue to say console.log, nothing is going to happen here. It is not going to get here, right? If you say let b equals 5 plus 5, it is not going to get here because we've returned this already. Now we are returning only the name. Let's assume we want to return a greeting for sure, right? So I'm going to use what we've learned already, which is using templating, right? String templating here. So I have name, right? So let's say good, and I'm going to bring in the greeting just like this. So let's have greeting. Yeah, so good morning or good afternoon or good evening alongside the name. Let's take this off. All right, so that's simple. So let's now have, let greeting equals, I'm going to call that function, which is the greetings function. Okay, so greetings function, by the way, yeah, greetings function. Let's pass in the name. So I'm going to put a name of John Doe, and then the let's put morning, right? So we can go ahead and print this greeting. Let's save that. Okay. So if I should run this in the terminal here, we have good morning, John Doe, right? If I should change this to evening, evening, and I save, let's run this. We have good evening, John Doe. Correct? Yeah. So basically, we have good morning. You can change this. So you have the parameters right here, or the arguments, right? You have the return statement here that is used for returning that output. Okay, and then you have the function name and the function declaration. Now there are different ways to create functions in JavaScript, right? What we are using right now is the standard way of setting up your function. Okay, you can read this up to get more details. You can actually return a function from a different function. There are more advanced things here, right? Just take it one step at a time. Yeah, so you can basically call a function within another function. Of course, you can pass in a function as an argument. All right. So when you pass in that function, you can then use that function with the value you have here. So this function should be created somewhere else, doing some other things. Okay. Um, yeah. So you have different ways to work with a function. You can go, you have an anonymous function, which is a function that doesn't really have a name, right? So an anonymous function are functions without a name. They are often used as arguments to other functions or within function expressions. Okay. So it doesn't have a name, you just call that, pass it into a variable, or you probably don't even need to pass that at all and it executes. This is an example of what you use on your browser when you're setting timeout, right? To basically set some sort of delayed log every, at 1000. This should be like 1000 second, I believe, right? Or millisecond. Okay. I can't really remember the exact, measurements, right, at this point, except to try it out. Okay. So, yeah, so that is it. It's already past 9. You can actually check this out because we have even more kind of functions. This is called a recursive function, right? Where you have a function that is calling itself to perform a particular calculation. But of course, you have a condition so that it doesn't call itself forever. You don't want to end up with an infinite loop. Okay, so you get to that point where if that condition is met, the function is then scattered or broken or destroyed, right? Or terminated, basically. Okay, so this will continue to call itself and perform a particular calculation until it gets to a point where it is no longer, it is no longer meeting the condition, and you return. All right. So this is an example. They use this to check for a factorial function. This is a very practical use case for recursion, factorial. Okay. Um, you also have functions where you can apply a default parameter, right? So you can pass in your own parameter, but if you don't pass in a parameter, just like the way we have greet without a parameter, it also goes with the existing record I was putting as the default, which is guest. If you pass in a parameter, it overrides that. Okay, it overrides guest, and your own parameter would be appended to that particular, record you have here for name. Okay, so if you don't pass in one, it works with the default. If you pass in one, it works with your own option, right? So that's how you apply default parameter. Now, in our next class, we're going to go as far as checking out, more type of functions, including arrow functions, right? We'll check it out in the next class, okay? And we'll also check out more details on anonymous function, recursive function. So you see, we have more detailed examples, individual files explaining, the details of those type of functions. All right. So I'll see you in the next class, which is tomorrow, of course. And then we can also discuss more advanced stuffs. Yeah, when I mean advanced, I mean a little bit, more than what you have covered so far, like classes, right? We call it object-oriented programming. So we'll basically touch on some of these things as we progress. Okay. So do have a wonderful evening, and let me see if I can take the next 1 or 2 minutes to answer a question here. Um, all right. So someone said maybe you should try opening. Okay. Okay, let me go to the chart here. We have hello, sir. Um, how important is the flow of JavaScript code? For instance, can the greeting variable come before the invocation? Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, yes, you can basically have, you can actually, there's something called hoisting. We'll get to that, and we'll also cover some other things, right? You can actually have your function, below, right? Because, the thing is, it's always advisable to make sure you have like an orderly structure, against developers coming to your project to see how it works, right? But of course, that flow is not, it's not like the way you have it in Python that interprets, every single item, one, two, three, four. But of course, it is good to have that orderly, manner so that, this guy can basically, call. Okay, it can call that function above right here, but it's not like Python where it's a must, right? So there's something called hoisting. We'll also take a look at that and cover some other things that would address your question even better. All right. So yeah, thank you, and do have a wonderful evening. I'll see you tomorrow. All right.